once again, and welcome to our fifth fabuloso, fantastical, awesomest episode of Awesome Sauce Board Games. Once again, I am your host, the dashing BJ Weiler. This week, we are bringing ourselves back yet again to the Elder Scrolls Online, also known as TESO or ESO. But this time, we are not talking about the subscription model. We are talking about crafting. And this will be a little something of crafting in general in games. So, on their Facebook, a couple of days ago, the Elder Scrolls Online linked an article, a recent article of MMORPGs that discussed crafting and the Elder Scrolls. And I will also link that in the description of this video. So essentially, what the Elder Scrolls wants to know is, will the game make a crafter out of you? Now that can be a loaded question in and of itself. Maybe not quite as controversial, here's that word again, controversial as a business model for a game. But it is polarizing, and it does get a bit of debate going in and of itself. Crafting. Yes, wonderful, boring, tedious, nonsensical, useless crafting. Well, now you know how I stand on it, but seriously, crafting is one of those things that really is an interesting topic. And it's interesting because it really, the system is really dependent on the game. It's really an interesting system just because it's to me, it's not a meat and bone system. Meat and bone system is a storyline, is fighting, it's battles, it's questing, and in and of that, partial exploration of the game world itself. To me, those are meat and bone systems of a game, especially an RPG game. You develop your character as you progress through the game. And part of progressing through the game is the questing, is your epic quest. Is you are the hero of the world. You're getting through that game. Now, this can apply to some other games as well, depending on how the design and the storyline is set. But the meat and bones is getting through that storyline, is progressing your characters, advancing through the battles in the game, and seeing the world around you and making your character stronger and better by exploring, by doing this quest, and by doing the battles. Now, crafting, how does crafting play a part in this? Well, that primarily depends on the game. Now, for me, as I said, to me, crafting, I consider crafting to be like a side venture, a side activity. It's not part of the meat and bones activity. It's more is like a mini game, like fishing or playing Pazaak, say, in Star Wars. If Star Wars: The Old Republic had Pazaak or swoop racing, that's what it would be. It would be a mini game that you would play. It's not really part of the content. It's something that you don't need to participate in order to progress your character, in order to experience the storyline and reach endgame or play PvP. That's what these side ventures, that's what these mini games are. And I consider crafting to be one of those mechanics that falls into that category of mini game, so to speak. But that largely also depends on the game. Now, in a pure sandbox game, or a game which most likely would be pure sandbox if designed this way, if a game is centered around crafting, and that is integral to the game, then yes, it needs to have a deep and complex system. It should be necessary to be involved in that in one way or another in order to experience the game. But again, that is more suited towards this pure sandbox game, or a game that is just designed in that manner. Like SimCity. SimCity is essentially a building game. You're just making stuff, building stuff. So if you had an RPG in that manner, to where most you would craft your buildings, you would go to a crafter to get your materials, you go to a crafter get your supplies, that kind of stuff, then yes, that should have a deep, complex, necessary crafting system. But for the majority of the games that we have now that we're talking about, still looks crooked. Anyway, that we're talking about theme parks or hybrids that are, a mix of, a different percentage of theme park, a different percentage of sandbox. For the most part, most of the hybrid games are mostly theme park, and your mini missions and your mini games and your side missions and some of the extra unnecessary content is the sandbox type content. So in a primarily theme park game, no, crafting should have crafting to some extent. To how much extent really depends on what the developer wants to do. But my own personal opinion is that crafting should be a mini game. It should not be integral to the game. It should not be necessary to be a crafter or go to a crafter in order to progress your character, or most importantly, access content. Your ability to access content should not depend on crafting in a theme park or hybrid game. What it should do then, though, is give you an option to go to customize your gameplay experience, essentially customize how you want your character to look. Crafting should be one of those options you can go to in order to do that. It should not be necessary or forced upon you to do that. When something is forced upon you, it could start to be detrimental to gameplay. It could start to be a bad game design in the eyes of many players. Outside of, you have your basic MMO mechanics, stuff that, not everybody likes, but you got your meat and bones, the questing, world exploration, the meat and bones I talked about. That's your basic stuff. A lot of the other stuff is not necessary to the meat and bones. And that's the way crafting should remain. If it starts intruding on that, then that's where I see it to become bad game design. Now, essentially, all the crafting I've really ever needed or done was the crafting system in Guild Wars, the original Guild Wars. To me, it was a nice, simple system. It was unobtrusive, and I could essentially ignore it if I wanted to. Because quite frankly, every game I've played, I don't even remember. I couldn't even tell you if some of the games that I played. I know, like Star Wars: The Old Republic has a deeper crafting system, which I've partaken in a little bit just to experience it. But again, to me, it's just tedious. It's just boring. It's not really something I'm focusing on right now. In Star Wars: The Old Republic, I'm just focusing on the meat and bones. I'm focusing on, clearing the map, visiting the different areas in the game world, different zones in the game world, progressing through the storyline, advancing my character, fighting the boss battles, and that kind of stuff. And crafting to me is, well, maybe I'll do it at some point down the line. It's unimportant to me. It's tedious to me. It's boring to me. I don't want to deal with it. Essentially, that's the way I look at sandbox games too. That's why I'm the gamer who prefers a theme park. Yes, I don't mind handholding. I prefer the theme park. I prefer the hybrid, primarily theme park. I don't mind having sandbox elements as long as those sandbox elements do not detract from the game. Because those, I go to theme parks, like I go to real life theme parks. I go to a theme park game to experience the quests, the storyline, the fighting, the combat system, and that includes PvP too. Now that I am playing more and more MMOs, the end game, raids or whatever, the end game happens to be, if it, for Guild Wars, there's essentially PvP for a time. That's why I play these games. That's why I enjoy them. I can consume them at my own pace. I can consume them in the manner of my choosing, and I'm consuming them for the entertainment value of experiencing that content. Now, with sandbox games, the ones I've experienced, tried to get into, just they are time wasting to me. They are essentially, they end up being boring, just because, for one, they're probably badly designed, but just because that's not the type of gamer I am. That's not how I prefer to play my games. I don't prefer the pure sandbox. I prefer the theme park, where I'm guided through the storyline, and to where I can experience it at my own pace, experience it in the manner that I happen to want to experience it at that point in time, and that I'm not dependent on doing a lot of side on an essential activity in order to progress. Same thing if I go to a theme park in real life. I go to a theme park in real life to ride the rides and see the attractions. I don't go there so I can pretty up the parking lot, aka, in-game housing in the game. I don't go up there I don't spend my money for a ticket to enter the theme park in order just to pretty up the parking lot, or to go in and admire the side of a prettily painted building, or to go in and paint the side of the building. That's not why I go to the theme park. I go to the theme park to be entertained. I go to the theme park to be entertained by the rides and to be entertained by the attractions. I don't go there to be entertained by, the parking lot or the side of a painted building. I don't go there to do those things myself. I expect the rides to entertain me. I expect the attractions to entertain me. I don't go to a theme park expecting to have to overly entertain myself, except when I'm waiting in line. So that's why I stay away from sandboxes, because sandboxes inherently are put in the hands of the players. It's up to the player to craft, so to speak, the experience they want out of the game. To me, no. I like the hand holding. I like to be able to judge how much content I can consume in the free time that I have. Now, in Guild Wars, we'll use a couple of Guild Wars examples now on this subject. The second campaign of Guild Wars was factions, and in factions, the storyline missions were changed a little bit from the original, in that they were timed storyline missions. So in order to get the highest reward, or get credit for completing the mission at the master level, is what they called it, you had to complete that mission and the side objectives in an arbitrarily set amount of time. Now, factions, the campaign in and of itself, is my least favorite of the three. But part of that mechanic, I sort of grew into that and realized, I said, you know what, I kind of like this, because I can go see how much time it takes to reach the mastery level for that mission and say, wow, tomorrow night I have, pretty much that set amount of time that I can be able to play. So I can go in there, hop in there, do the mission, bang, I'm done, and I'm out. Getting back to the interruptions of real life. So that's what I like. I like to be able to say, okay, I've got this much time. How much can I accomplish in that amount of time? That's what theme parks give me. Give me the ability to actually progress and accomplish things. I'm a spreadsheet player. I like checking the boxes off. Got that done, on to the next. Sandbox games, not so much. And crafting is a part of that. Crafting is something that just, to me, gets in the way, especially if it's something that's required for me in order to check a box off, in order to be able to do a quest or do endgame or something like that. That's why the crafting in the original Guild Wars was something I enjoyed. Essentially, in that, you were just gathering materials while you were out doing your quest, doing your exploration, doing your battles. They had the common crafting items, and they had the elite crafting items, so to speak. more rare. I think they called them the rare crafting material. So essentially what you did, you had what they called salvage kits. You had a basic salvage kit, which, anything you found in the world, any drops you got, weapons, armor, trash items essentially, you could break down into a crafting material. The basic salvaging kit gave you the common crafting material. Then you had a higher level salvaging kit. I forget off the top of my head the exact name of it, but essentially the high level salvaging kit gave you also a basic chance at getting a common item, but it also gave you a chance at getting one of the rarer crafting materials. So essentially, you'd go through the world, you'd have your salvaging kit, you'd break down the drops you didn't need, the trash items, into the materials, and then you just stored the materials till you found an NPC that had something that you wanted, either armor or a weapon or what have you. So you would give the NPC the crafting materials they required, and in return you would get that armor, item, what have you. And that was the crafting system. And that worked just fine to me. It was not complex. It was not something that I had to put a lot of time into. I essentially could just do it by playing the game, because I would just be gathering the materials, salvaging the items, and I would have all the material I would need if I happened to run into an NPC that had something I liked that I wanted. Here you go. Here's your crafting materials. Give me my stuff. So nice, simple, easy. Now, of course, Star Wars The Old Republic is a little bit more complex than that. I mean, you're still out there. You can still gather materials as you're exploring, doing your quests and stuff. But in this case, you're doing the actual crafting yourself. And there's a lot more. It's a ton of different crafting professions. There's a ton of different recipes, so to speak, that you can craft within those professions. So it's still, on the surface, a rather simple system, essentially as simple as Guild Wars is, in that you're essentially just gathering the materials, and then afterwards you're just basically pushing buttons to get something. In this case, you're doing it yourself, or in the terms of the actual mechanic and story of it, you're actually telling one of your NPC companions to go ahead and craft this stuff. But again, all you're doing is essentially pushing the buttons, and then after a set amount of time, bang, you have the item in your inventory. So that's still a simple system. That's one that is okay with me. Again, I'm not really deep into the crafting system in SWTOR. I've done a bit of it. I've leveled some of my character's crafting abilities. But again, it's something that's a side venture, that it's not something that's obtrusive to me. It's not something I need to do, because I can still get the gear that I need to progress just by playing the game, by playing the quests, by playing the missions. I'm getting rewarded gear as mission rewards, as quest rewards, and also as drops, and I can just throw it on my character, and it gives me the better stats I need to progress further. And that, again, is a good system to me. It's something that is completely unobtrusive. I can play it and consume it at my own pace, and when and how I want to. Now, when crafting becomes obtrusive, that's when I have a problem with it. And again, that's what we're discussing. That's why I've been discussing with people on the MMORPG article and on the ESO Facebook page, is how obtrusive should the crafting system be? Now, what I've equated it to, as I've thought about this is that I don't want to see crafting become a pay-to-win system, essentially. Now, this analogy, we all know what pay-to-win is. We talked about it a couple episodes ago. I gave you the official definition of pay-to-win. So, essentially, in pay-to-win, you have to go to a store's cash shop to get an item that is powerful, that has a certain level of power that you can't get in the game, and you need that item in order to progress in the storyline, or progress in the game, or to defeat a boss. It's something that you have to go to the cash shop in order to complete content in the game. That's pay to win. That's not good. Now, this isn't to say that crafting is pay to win. But the same basic principle applies in that in order to progress through something, you have to go to an outside source not related to that actual something, either a boss battle or a mission, a dungeon, or whatever, or what have you. You have to go to something else other than just simple combat and exploration in order to progress through the game to get to the next level of combat and exploration. That's where crafting can be pay to win in the base principle of the matter. Except in this case, it's not the cash shop you're going to, it's the crafter. It's not real life money you're spending, but you're spending the in-game currency, which of course then in order to afford whatever the crafter is charging for the item that you need in order to play the game, you have to grind. That's right. Another one of those bad systems that, well, not necessarily bad, but one of those systems that as the MMO has evolved, as games have evolved, has become less and less tolerable, less and less desirable. Nobody wants to grind in a game anymore. It's boring. It's tedious. We don't want to do boring and tedious stuff in our games. Real life is boring and tedious enough. We don't want to have to do it in our forms of entertainment that should be fun and exciting. So you have to go grind to get your in-game currency in order to go to this crafter. Hopefully they're online, or depending on how the mechanics are, hopefully, whatever shop or auction house or wherever it is still has the item you need in stock. Otherwise you're screwed anyway. But then you have to go to this outside source in order to get back to doing what you were doing, which was advancing in the storyline, trying to beat a mob, a boss, or what have you, or getting through a certain zone in the world. That, to me, is still the basic principle of pay to win. Going to an outside source that should not be necessary to go to in order to advance through the meat and bones of the game. So to me, crafting should be there. To what aspect largely depends on the game, but crafting should be an option. Yes, crafting should be there, just like in player housing. To me, I don't need player housing. I mean, Guild Wars never had player housing. SWTOR doesn't have player housing. What else? Defiance doesn't have player housing. Rift has player housing. I've just started playing Rift. Maybe I'll get into the dimensions, maybe not. To me, that's another side thing that really doesn't interest me. I'm interested in going out and exploring the world, beating up the bad guys, pointing my, getting the pointy end of my stick or my lightsaber into the bad guy, and advancing through the storyline. That's why I play, as I mentioned, that's why I play the theme park games. That's why I play these games, to advance through the content, through the storyline, and not to really waste a lot of time on the side stuff. So that's, it's, again, how much of a game incorporates that is really up to, depends on the game, as I said. But it should not be obtrusive. It should be an option. It should not be required in order to reach endgame or play endgame or play PvP. It should not be required to be able to advance through the storyline. The only thing that should be required to advance through the storyline, to play PvP or to play endgame, is one's own ability to advance through the game, to progress through the game, through the missions, through the zones, and strengthen your character that way. Crafting and any item that a crafter makes should be an optional item and should, like a good cash shop, be a cosmetic item. Sure, have crafting in there. Have crafters be able to craft and gain level gear. And sure, you know what? I have no problem with crafters being able to craft the coolest looking gear in a game. That's fine. Just make it an option. Don't make me have to go there in order to partake or complete a certain part of the content of the game. That's where it becomes obtrusive. That's where it becomes a bad mechanic. As long as it is one of the options in order to form how your character looks. If you place a high value on how your character looks, then yes, having crafting there to satisfy that need is a good thing. It should be in an MMO. It should be necessary if you value, how your character looks over, the core mechanics, the core content. But if you're like me and you don't place you can place some value on it, but to you, if it's the choices between cosmetics and the choices between the meat and bones content, I'm taking the meat and bones content. If I don't look as good completing the meat and bones content, that's fine with me. I just want to be able to play the content, complete the content. That's why I'm playing. Part of an RPG, part of my pleasure of playing an RPG is being able to customize my character, make it look as unique as possible, but that still does not trump just being able to complete and progress through the content. So having to go to a crafter should be an option in those games. But what do you think? Are you a crafter? Are you not a crafter? Let us know in the comments below. Do you agree or disagree? Let us know. Like I said, I will link that MMORPG article, and I'll link TISO's Facebook page too. That way, in addition to discussing the topic in the comments below, we can discuss it in those two forum type social media things as well. But there we have it. That's just my opinion. And we know what the rule is already. If you don't, go check out one of the past episodes. We mentioned it a couple of times. Anyway, that's it for now. Until next time, I will see you in game.